If we're not sustainable and if we don't take care of our land, if we don't respect the resource that's providing our nourishment every single day, then we're doing an injustice to that soil. We're doing an injustice to ourselves and Mother Nature.
Hello, I'm Zippy Duvall, and I'm president of American Farm Bureau, but I'm also host today on our Farmside Chat. So thank you for joining us, and I look forward to the conversation. You know, we're in that time of year where we celebrate summer. We're coming in after Memorial Day here, and everybody's getting ready for the 4th of July. But summertime is one of those times, one of those seasons where we like to get outside and cook, whether it's on the patio or at the beach or at a lake somewhere, or just in the backyard, you know, just enjoying having family and friends over and enjoying a lot of the things that are grown around us, fruits and vegetables. And today we're going to talk about a fruit that's very popular during 4th of July, and that's the watermelon. And we got a great farmer from Florida, Kevin Sanchez, who grows watermelons down there, and he's going to tell us all about what goes into growing a watermelon and what he's doing on his farm for sustainability and all the good things that go around it. So I hope you enjoy listening to this conversation, because I think that you'll find out that you get a really good deal when you buy a watermelon. And today I have a great guest with me today. He's a watermelon producer from down in the great state of Florida. His name's Kevin Sanchez. And Kevin, I want to welcome you to our show and look forward to our conversation. And I'd like for you to tell my guests, tell my listeners a little bit about yourself and your farm and what you do on your farm there.
Yes, sir. No, definitely. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I want to thank the whole audience for listening in. Overall, my name's Kevin Sanchez. I'm a third-generation farmer. I was actually born in Medellin, Colombia, in South America. We were actually brought to this country by mom and dad back in '92. We've been here ever since. We've never really left. We go about 2 to 3 times a year to go visit family because all of our family's over there. Back in 2008, we had sold the farm in Colombia and decided to kind of start operations here in Florida. We did it on a smaller scale. But as we progressed and I started growing up and I started really showing a big passion, I'm really the only one in the family that likes the farm compared to everybody else. My brother, he doesn't even like to go outside or even get dirty or even sweat, to put it to you like that. But overall, I've been very fortunate, decided to go to school at the University of Florida. I graduated in animal science, specialized in beef cattle production and swine production with a little bit of agronomy in my background. But overall, it's crazy where life takes you, because I haven't even really used my beef cattle production in my studies from school. I've been doing a lot of agronomy work and a lot of financial management and operational management for different companies for the past 6 years. About 2 years ago, I partnered up with an individual named Trevor Bass, what's called Bass Farms, and we're actually partnered up and we grow melons together. He's a majority shareholder of the company, but overall I have a small portion of it, but I do everything from an operational and financial standpoint for his organization. In terms of what we do for farming, we do watermelons. We farm about 650 acres of watermelons. We do some grass seed, about 1,200 acres of grass seed. We do about 1,800 acres of small grain crops, and those small grain crops will be anywhere from brown top and iron clay peas. We mostly do that. We'll start growing them this time of year, and once we start plowing up our watermelon ground, we'll go ahead and put more of that crop down. And our iron clay peas are more of a fall crop. We'll start them around that September area. We'll play with some of the rains out there that comes our time of year. On top of that, we actually are a cow-calf operation, and we do raise replacement heifers on the farm here. We're a little bit shy over 500 head of mama cows, and we just started playing around with some heifers here that we've been developing for the past year. We only have 80 head of them, but we hope to get in a rotation where we have 200 to 300 head of them coming out on a yearly basis. Well, you can actually say we're actually pretty busy here from the 1st of January to the end of the year. We always have something to do. We actually grow tobacco too. We do organic production and conventional production. We have 235 acres of that in combination of organic and conventional. So we definitely have a lot of our plate, but we're excited and we definitely stay busy, sir.
So grass seed, what kind of grass seed?
We have Argentine. We have roughly about 300 to 400 acres of Argentine grass seed, and then the rest of it's Pensacola.
Okay.
It's interesting because Trevor Bass is actually part ownership of a seed mill, Southeast Seed, that's out here out of Newberry, Florida. and we do pump a lot of that seed into his seed mill operation.
Tell our guests where Newberry, Florida is in the state.
Do you know where Gainesville, Florida is? It's kind of north central Florida. Yeah. Where you look at where the University of Florida is, we're due west of it, about 25 miles.
Okay, all right.
And we farm close to 5,000 acres here in this area. Newberry, close to Trenton. We manage a lot of different properties there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I'm glad to have you on here today. And, you know, I know we're going to talk about watermelons. So tell me what variety of watermelons you grow.
Yes, sir. We actually have a small list here because we have so many different fields for this year.
Is that because of maturity time, or is that because of people have different wants at certain times of the year? Why so many different kinds?
We're a very interesting operation because we normally pick for about 8 weeks. So we extend our growing season. We find early maturing varieties that'll go ahead and go at the upfront of our picking season. On an average year, we'll start picking about the middle of May. Around that 15th to 14th of May, we'll start with production. And normally what we try to do is to go ahead and pick early germinating varieties, early varieties that are going to mature quicker. And then we go ahead and pick something middle of the road and at the end of the road to make sure that we can supply to our brokerage and our companies that we can provide for 8 weeks as a whole. Because the last thing you want to get into is that we have 650 acres and they all need to be picked at the same time. It's challenging from a labor standpoint. It's challenging from a picking standpoint. It's challenging from a weather standpoint. This time of year, it'll start raining every single day. So we've been in a drought for the past 3 weeks, and we've been welcoming the rain that actually started yesterday.
Yeah.
But overall, the varieties that we're using Sweet Dawns, we're using Troubadours, Red Garnets, Excursions, Captivations, Crunchy Reds, Joyrides, Exclamations, and we have a couple trials. We do a little bit of work with the University of Florida and some seed companies to see what varieties are working well in our region, what varieties are actually producing the proper yield, what varieties actually have some disease resistant, if it's Fusarium wilt, if it's towards powdery, if it's towards downy. And we run all those trials on farm. Not only does it benefit the industry as a whole, but it gives us firsthand in terms of what actually works for our farm. A lot of people want to pick and choose and say that, no, we're going to do this one variety because daddy's been doing it for the past 40 years and it's the best one. But that's not necessarily true. We try to always keep an open mind to see what's the best one for our region and our farm.
Well, talk about the best one. Now we're going to create a rush to the market to buy watermelon. Which one do you think is the best?
Sir, that's a very hard question to ask. Honestly, the best one to me is the one that's going to produce the most size and yield, and is going to hit the market at a perfect time from a pricing standpoint.
Okay.
But overall, I've been very impressed. We've started a new variety called the Red Garnet, and I've been very impressed with them. The Troubadour is an older style variety, but it's been very consistent overall. And then our Crunchy Reds, you can leave them out there and not even look at them for a while, and you know they're going to be there for you to produce. They're a pretty stable breed in itself.
And you call it Country Red?
No, Crunchy Reds.
Crunchy
Yes,
Red.
sir.
See, I'm making notes. So tell me, I'm sure when you're talking about a variety and what you're going to grow, how much of the consumer's needs as far as being able to fit it in the refrigerator, whether they want seeds or not, tell me how much that plays in what you decide you're going to grow.
Honestly, we're at the mercy of the consumer. Whatever the consumer wants is what we try to do, because if we don't have anybody to buy this product, we're in trouble. We can't just be in the business to be hobby farmers. At the end of the day, watermelons actually are sized at different sizes. So we have different counts. We go anywhere from an 80 count, 60 count, 45 count, 36 count, and a 28 count. And we actually have a 35 count, which is a seeded watermelon. The 35 count is seeded because the rest of them are seedless. We have that seeded watermelon because it's a pollinator for our fields. We normally put a pollinator every 3 to 4 plants in between to have proper pollination, because we use bees to help pollinate our plants to make sure we have fruit set. In terms of counts, when you talk about the numbers as a whole, when you say a 36 count or a 45 count, that pretty much explains what fits in a bin. A bin on average is going to weigh 700 pounds. So if it's a 35 count melon, it's a bigger melon because there's only 35 of them fit in a bin Then when you go to that 45, it's a smaller melon that fits 45 in a bin. When you talk about a consumer and what they're looking for from a refrigeration standpoint and what they like to buy, the sought after count is a 45 count overall. Our market is based on a 45 count normally, 9 out of 10 times. But that's normally what the consumer likes to see, is that 45. I wish we can just produce a field of just strictly 45s, but Mother Nature doesn't allow for that. It's strictly impossible. Depending on the year, depending on weather conditions, depending on how your crop nutrition program is, there's so many different variations in terms of what you expect to have in terms of yield, but across the board, you'll have certain percentages from 28 all the way to 80 counts across the field.
So we used to hear a lot about GMOs and still hear some of it, but a lot of times when people see that there's a seedless watermelon, well, I grew up, there was no such thing as a seedless watermelon. I know that there's not a GMO watermelon out there, but how do you get to a seedless watermelon without GMO?
Well, it's actually a very unique process that a lot of people don't understand. It's called hybridization. It's pretty much in our breeding program. So what you have is these seed companies, they'll have one watermelon in one trial, another watermelon in another trial that's actually proven, and they'll go ahead and crossbreed them through pollination and flowering to make a hybrid off that plant, is normally what we normally see and what we do with our crop. I get that question a lot from individuals from all over. I've lived in South Florida for a long time, and every time I go home to visit my family, they're always asking me, "Are you producing GMO crops? Are you feeding us GMO crops?" And no, that's not the case. There's a big misunderstanding on GMO and a breeding program with hybridization.
Truth be known, GMO really only speeds up what nature does anyway.
We've been very fortunate to have science in our background with technology to actually expedite one in terms of what GMO products or GMO crops actually do for us. Yeah. They're actually more sustainable. They use resources a lot more efficient. We know exactly from a disease and a pest standpoint where we can control them better. Overall, if it wasn't for a GMO crop or a GMO variety, we'd be in trouble, especially trying to feed this population we have on this earth.
One of the great things out of some of all these conversations that are kind of way off the beaten path and really not based on science, it gives us the opportunity to tell what really the good is that comes out of the technologies that we use. I mean, even the discussion around climate, it gives us the opportunity to tell people. So, we need those tools to be able to keep our weeds down so that we don't have to plow the ground, so that do all the right things for our climate. And it really has given us an environment to tell that story. And if people come into it with an open mind, you can see them, they're almost getting what you're trying to tell them, and they're more acceptable to that. So, we look at it as an opportunity, and we try to seize that moment all the time to try to explain what y'all are doing out there on the farm, what we're doing here on my farm too. So tell me, how did COVID affect you last year?
Oh man, I'll tell you, back in about February, early February, late February, I thought I was going to have to plow up my fields. South Florida started showing a lot of indication where retail stores, wholesalers weren't buying product. You had farmers plowing up fields because they just couldn't sell it. There was no point of them putting a picking crew through it, just because it would have ruined their bottom line more, and they would have been more in the hole. We waited to the last minute. We kept on rolling. We stayed positive here on the farm. We said something's going to change. People are going to be home. They're going to want watermelon. We can't just, all this hard work we've put into the ground already, we can't just give up. And we were very fortunate enough on the upfront of it that it didn't affect us as hard. But all the rest of the industries it did affect drastically. But overall, I would say COVID did affect us on the yard, on the packing shed. We were all very nervous. We were all trying to have proper food safety, sanitation, number one, and then we're trying to follow proper COVID restrictions and protocols. And I can tell you, I'd go out there with the crews. We have H2A workers with us, and we'd all try to keep distances from one another. And even with our crew boss and our harvesting crew, we pretty much told them, guys, you're only allowed to go to your homes and come here. Don't go out. Don't go to restaurants. Bring your food there. Please, we have too much at stake for you guys to be playing around with this. And we took it very serious in that perspective. We did run into a couple issues around this where actually some H2A groups actually got infected and they couldn't pick or process or anything. And they did lose a lot of yield in the field, since you pretty much have to sit at home for 14 to 21 days in that standpoint. Some of those farmers were in trouble for that long until they could find another group to come and pick. But a lot of people think in this country that it's very easy to get a harvesting crew the next day. You have to have these forward contracts with them a year in advance. You have to tell them exactly what acreage you're going to use, how long you're going to pick for. They're going to have to figure out housing. They're going to have to figure out how they're going to feed these people. You have to have a strategic plan in place to make sure that we have enough work for them and that we take care of them accordingly. And especially from a health standpoint with this COVID situation, it had us very worried for a long time, but we got through it.
So can you find enough labor?
We're running into that issue right now. I'm nervous for tobacco right now. A lot of these guys are leaving to go work in restaurants. They're giving them better pay in restaurants. They're giving them better benefits because there's a lot of people in this country that are staying home and not working for the time being. And they're actually able to find other jobs in restaurants that weren't there before, and they're getting better pay. So we're a little hesitant towards the tail end of this crop and the beginning of my tobacco crop that we're going to have enough people to process all of our production. We'll see in about the next 3 to 4 weeks if they'll show up. If they won't, I'm going to have to go ahead and strike a deal with our harvester now and see if he'll give me another 15 to 20 people just to get through my tobacco season.
I said a lot of people make the comment when I talk about not being able to find people to work on my farm. They say, well, if you pay them something, pay them a good, decent wage, they come out there and work. I know what I say. Tell me what you say to them when they say that, because...
Okay. How do I say this in the most polite way? At the end of the day, us as farmers, we have a certain margin that we have to maintain. If we were getting paid better for our crop, or we weren't getting nitpicked from what's happening in Central and South America, a lot of wholesale and retail is getting a lot of this product from Central and South America, and it's extremely hard to compete. I'll give you a perfect example. I have a very good friend of mine that lives in Mexico. He has operations in Mexico and Guatemala and Honduras. For them to produce a box of tomatoes, they're around that $4.50 to produce a box of tomatoes, and that's including harvesting cost. For us, we're closer to that $8 to $10. So there's no way we can ever compete with the workforce like that physically. And when I get asked that question specifically, Zippy, I'm not allowed. Not that I'm not allowed to. I could, but my bottom line is going to be affected. Sure. It's very hard to go ahead and get up and pay someone $20 an hour when the farm can't maintain that. There's no way. So, it's not viable.
It's not financially sustainable. You can't sustain your farm if you're paying more than you can afford. And of course, in our country, we enjoy the cheapest food of anywhere in the world, and it means that we make more money on our farms than farmers do on their farms around the world too, because of the cost that we have in that. So, I just think it's important for everybody to understand why that is. Just about all farmers I know that have workers out there, if they're good workers and they show up on time and they're dedicated to the farm like you want your employees to be, they're very well paid for what they do. But there's far and in between people that want to get dirty. You admitted some of your family might not want to get dirty. I got some of those in my family too, But not everybody wants to go out there in the hot sun and pick watermelons and do the things you got to do to grow. So speaking of that, I know that everybody just thinks you can go out there and drop a seed in the ground and come back a few weeks later and pick a watermelon. Tell us what all's in growing a watermelon.
Oh man, okay. Our watermelon season. We normally start around that November and December the year before. We'll go ahead and strategically pick our growing season in terms of where we're going to have our plots. Here in North Florida, we try to maintain a rotation between crops about every 5 to 8 years. We try to push closer to that 8-year rotation before we ever farm watermelons on that ground again. Just because of a disease standpoint, fusarium wilt standpoint, and technically, you're not supposed to farm watermelons behind watermelons again. It just creates too much disease pressure and fungal pressure and soil pressure too, nematode pressure that we have to be very careful with. So the work starts normally in November, December. We'll start plowing grounds. We'll go ahead and get soil analysis done. Once we get a soil analysis, we pretty much figure out what's in the soil, what NPK values we have, what micro and macronutrients we have in the soil. And then we need to go ahead and adjust to see what this crop requirements are. A lot of people don't understand that when you're growing a plant that has certain NPK values that it needs to reach to produce a certain amount of fruit for you. And it's just like comparing it to a growing child. If you don't have the proper nutrients for that child up front, it's going to be handicapped for the rest of its life. And it's the same approach we take with these plants. We want to make sure these plants have the proper amount of nutrients from the start, from when we transplant them until we finish them in the field and we plow them up. So once we get done plowing fields and getting our soil test done, we'll go ahead and see what our pH values are too. So to see if we have to balance our pH. A lot of our soils here in North Florida can be sandy with low pHs. So we have to go ahead and put dolomite out to kind of have a buffer to raise that pH level up. And then once we get that done, we'll go ahead and about end of January, middle of February, we'll start laying plastic. What I mean by plastic is that plastic mulch that encompasses, we'll make a bed where we plant these plants on. And the reason we make that bed is, one, to capture soil, and it'll have a small piece of drip tape underneath that plastic bed, where we're going to go ahead and spoon feed that crop with water and nutrients at strategic times throughout the crop cycle. So once we have all that plastic laid, we'll go ahead and prepare for transplants to come in. About 30 to 35 days before we go ahead and say we're going to plant, these plants go to a grow house or a transplant house. They go ahead, we have individuals in the industry that are specialized in growing these plants at certain times for us to make sure that we have a very uniform crop and the crop is healthy before getting into the field. So roughly we try to hit that late February to early March planting date with our transplants once they've been in the greenhouse for 28 to 35 days. And then we'll have crews ready with tractors and planters that'll go ahead and start setting these plants. So to kind of give you a rough image of what it looks like is, you'll have a big tractor and you'll have a big bar behind it, and it holds a bunch of different trays on it where you have these transplants. They'll come anywhere from 128 count to 98 count or 200 plants per tray. And then as they sit there and the tractor takes them on the rows, these individuals are sitting down with a tray of plants, and they get one plant and they go ahead and they pluck it into the ground. And right before them, there's this setter that's making holes for them, and all they have to do is just go ahead and plug the plant in, and then go ahead and cover up its root base to make sure it has a firm ground to go ahead and grow. So after we go through that stage, we're roughly, depending on the time of year and labor, it takes us roughly 2 to 3 weeks, but on average it takes us 2 weeks to plant 650 acres. Then once we get them planted, we go ahead and we start feeding them and babying them. Every single day we'll start watering, and depending on the time of year, we'll water 1 or 2 or 3 times a day. But up front, you really want to make sure once you put those transplants in the ground that you stress them. You teach that plant to go ahead and establish its root system, to go ahead and dig deep. That's very important for us up front, because if you train the plant to not to develop a thick root system, you're going to have to really manage that plant extremely hard from a water and nutrient standpoint on the top of that bed. And you want to make sure you teach that plant to go ahead and dig deep for that nutrient absorption. Because with our sandy soils, we don't have the proper positive and negative charges to maintain, or enough organic matter to maintain nutrients in the ground or water. Our water holding capacity is very, very minimal in this part of the world. So where we have to have split applications of fertilizer and water, it's our bread and butter. That's one of the things that we strive here at Bass Farms to kind of fight every single day to deal with, to make sure that we're having the proper water and nutrients for our crop. So as the growing cycle commences through that beginning of March all the way to about the middle of May, we pretty much go ahead, we scout fields, we check beds for moisture levels, we check for disease, we check for insect pressure. We're continuously going back and between every single field that has people specifically designated in each field where they'll maintain them. If there's ever an issue with disease or fungal, they'll go ahead and call me right away. They'll send me pictures. That'll be on top of my list of my priority to go take a look at it, and I'll go ahead, and if I can't figure out what it is, I have a very good relationship with the extension office here in Alachua County and Gilchrist County, where they have amazing resources. I'll speak about one individual called Kevin Sanchez. She's been extremely helpful. There's only so much knowledge I can maintain on the farm, and looking at plant disease and fungal pressure, I'm just not good at it. I know when we have a problem, and when that problem arises, I call her, and she's my backbone for that. But UF and the government here, local government, provides excellent resources in that, and I don't know what we would do without them. And she's always just a call away, or if she can't come in that day, she'll come in the next day first thing in the morning and confirm under her microscope, do the analysis, and tell me, Kevin, you have this. We need to be careful, and we'll go ahead and adjust our spray program with it.
So Extension Service has been so valuable to all of American agriculture for decades and decades and decades. And so my listeners, I hope they heard that part of it. The Extension Service, what comes out of our land grant colleges, that is, some of it is financed by the schools, some of it's financed by local government. All that investment is to make sure that people like Kevin and myself have the tools that are in our toolbox to be able to produce that quality crop that we can go buy at the store each and every day, and that's an important fact I'd like everybody to know. Kevin, after saying all that about a watermelon, and it makes me think that watermelon's pretty cheap now. It's pretty cheap. So thank you
That's what I tell my, yes, sir.
thank
Yes.
you for what you do, and I hope everybody else understands when they go pick that watermelon up, they realize that there's a lot went into it. I milked cows for 30 years. If everybody knew what went into a gallon of milk and what it cost to get that gallon of milk, you'd wonder how in the world can you sell milk cheaper than what you pay for water in a bottle, because it didn't take much to get water in a bottle. Kevin, is there anything else you'd like to touch on? I know you do a lot of financial stuff and for your farm and other farms, and you want to talk about sustainability or anything you want to do on your farm to improve the sustainability of your farm?
Yes, sir. Well, sustainability is a very important practice for us. One of the things I have that question a lot asked too, and one of the, I guess the best way to answer that question is that if we're not sustainable and if we don't take care of our land, if we don't respect the resource that's providing our nourishment every single day, then we're doing an injustice to that soil. We're doing an injustice to ourselves and Mother Nature. It's very important for us to go ahead and apply cover crops through the winter season, through the summertime. We have to try our best to build organic matter in our soils as much as we can to kind of hold nutrient as best as we can, because every bit of nutrient that gets away from us, it's something that's costing us more money to produce this crop.
Right.
I know I refer back to from a monetary standpoint a lot, but people need to understand too that it's important that if we're not sustainable in the sense of an economic standpoint, we can't be here in the long term. And that's one of the biggest issues we have here. And with my generation, there's just not a lot of people that want to get into it because it's not sustainable from an economic standpoint.
Yep.
So we had to be innovative in terms of using technology a lot. I use a bunch of technology in terms of soil moisture probes, in terms of nutrient programs where I can do sap test to see where my plants are from a nutrient NPK standpoint to make sure I'm giving that plant enough nutrients every single week. I can go ahead and send tissue samples into Waters Labs, if not weekly, bi-weekly, to make sure I have all the macro and micronutrients in this crop. With the water soil probes, every single morning and every evening, even almost 3 times a day, I'm watching these things to see how much absorption these plants are using in terms of water. The last 2 weeks have been very unique for us because we've been in that low 60s to 75 range in terms of temperatures. And then we've had some scorching heat in 95 to 97, and these plants are sucking water. So it's very important to use this technology because I can see the different levels in terms of where the moisture is in those beds. And I can figure out where uptake is happening and how long it's taking from the top of that bed to the bottom of that bed in terms of transpiration to get to the plant. So I can go ahead and I can adjust my intervals in terms of length and then intervals of time, where it's either once or 2 or 3 times a day. And we adjust that on a daily basis. I have 15 people out in the field that are calling me every single morning, Kevin, what do we need to do? What's going on? But if it wasn't for technology, I'm not sure we would be today, especially with competing with Central and South America and competing with development. That's one of the issues we have here, and why I have 15 fields of watermelons this year. It's because I have a lot of that development coming in towards our areas, and people forget where they're putting these houses. It's perfect farmland for us, and that's something we lose every year. And it's a shame to even see that go up. Of course, you want to see development happen. You don't want to take that away from a city or from an economy. But people do forget that we're losing more and more land every single year to houses. And it's hard to produce anything when the house is right there.
Yeah, we should always wonder, where we're going to get our food if we cover it all up with houses or put so many regulations out there that farmers can't continue to grow. Kevin, I think you're a great example of what a true American farmer is. I mean, you're a soil scientist, you're a financial analyst, we wear so many hats, and farmers and ranchers across this country, whether we're growing plants or taking care of our cattle or just taking care of our land, there is so many different things that we got to be good at, and it's just not easy to be a farmer and be competitive and be able to stay in business and be sustainable. But it's all about being sustainable financially. It's all about being sustainably environmentally, and it's all about being part of your community and providing those jobs for the people that live around you. So thank you for what you do. One thing I got to ask you, though, I'm from Georgia, and they tell me that Cordell, Georgia is the watermelon capital of the world now. What do you say to that?
Sir, I can't say too much about that, but I want you to come out to Newberry, Florida, and train in Levy County, and we'll show you how to grow a watermelon. I will tell you that.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much. Kevin Sanchez, watermelon farmer from down in Florida. We want everybody to go out and get you a watermelon, not just for the 4th of July, but before and after the holiday. Enjoy it, and just think about every time you take a bite of watermelon, how much work and thought and planning and effort and passion it went into producing that watermelon that you and your family is enjoying. Kevin Sanchez, thank you so much. We appreciate what you and your family do, and thank you for being on my show today. This is Zippy, Duvall, and Kevin Sanchez on Farmside Chat. We hope you have a wonderful day, and God bless you. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Farmside Chat. Please be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And while you're at it, take a minute to rate and review the podcast. This helps us continue to bring you farm fresh content that everyone can enjoy. Until next time, thank you and God bless you.